Hello and welcome to Texas Bitcoin Frontiers, discussions on the history, the theory of money and the history of Bitcoin. I'm Daniel Krawitz and this is Michael Goldstein. Welcome to part 7 of our ongoing discussion. Today we're talking about our most favorite topic in Bitcoin, which is altcoins. We can talk about scams generally too if you want. It's just such a huge topic. Maybe we should do scams next time.
Yeah,
because we don't have
so
a topic.
many.
Yes, it's
I'll
terrible.
actually need its own roundtable lecture series.
Actually, why don't we? Because I didn't have a topic planned for next time because we're kind of up to the present time with altcoins. So last time we talked about, well, I guess first we should define altcoin. So Bitcoin is the first distributed cryptocurrency. We're going to be using lots of buzzwords in this discussion, so we might as well start there. And you can basically just take the code of Bitcoin, because it's all open source, and change a few things around with it, and then you've got something that works basically the same way, and these are called altcoins. And of course, any sort of cryptocurrency that is not Bitcoin is an altcoin, because there are some that are not based on Bitcoin's code, but they all have the same basic problem. So last time we talked about how the value of money is due to the network effect. So if everybody wants money, then it's rational for you to want money, because you know that if you have some, there will be lots of opportunities to use it. If you need something, you'll be able to find somebody pretty easily who will take the money for whatever you need. And money works best when everybody uses the same money, when there's a universal standard. This doesn't mean that we're we're forcing people to a particular standard. It just means that people will naturally tend to use one standard, because that's what makes things easiest and most beneficial for everybody. But this idea has not been widely understood in the Bitcoin world. So there were a few altcoins that existed early on, but the first ones that kind of got famous were Namecoin and Litecoin, of course, my favorite one. So Namecoin kind of does something. It has a useful service.
Yes. Because
we do want to have a distributed DNS system that is not based on centralized authorities, but everything Namecoin can do, Bitcoin can also do. Because if you want to associate a name with a cryptographic key, you can just hash. You can hash the message and you can put it in an op return in Bitcoin, and then that proves the existence of this association, and someone just has to give it to you. Say, give me the thing that has this hash, and you can verify that that's it. So you don't need a separate blockchain to store a distributed DNS or any kind of distributed data. Then Litecoin came along, and basically the point of Litecoin is people who thought that they should always be able to turn their computer on to make money were annoyed that somehow you couldn't do this anymore with Bitcoin.
There was a big problem where Bitcoins were now, you were able to mine Bitcoins with GPUs. That was very unfair.
Totally.
So Litecoin was marketed as a GPU resistant altcoin?
Because nobody should ever have to have any capital investment to make a return, and nobody should ever have to do any work to make money, right? That's fair.
Yes.
Everybody should just turn their computer on and immediately get rich. So that's how Litecoin got started. Now, Litecoiners, let me say, I can't stand those guys. They are the worst. I hope nobody hears that. But every time you talk to them, their arguments are so disingenuous, because it is all about mining, and it's all about how they want to make money turning their computers on.
Right. Now there will be arguments such as differing confirmation speed.
Yes.
Which is not a security feature. Differing coin count. Some people truly believe that having 4 times as many coins was beneficial to a network.
This is the hashing algorithm.
Right, and then there's the script algorithm.
Right. So Litecoiners made claims that their hashing algorithm meant that their currency would be more distributed.
Yes.
As far as mining goes.
Right, and the reason being is that it's more GPU and later ASIC resistant, which both of those are now untrue.
Well, it is
ASICs
true.
are theoretically possible.
They're being produced. I don't know if they're out yet, but it is true that a script ASIC, the difference between a script ASIC machine and a script GPU machine is much less than the difference.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's say the same thing for Bitcoin, but I don't think that's any evidence that Litecoin is more distributed. I haven't seen it because more hashing power you just pay for. What matters is
you can also just buy a lot of GPUs.
Yeah, there's no reason why you can't fill a warehouse with GPUs if you have a lot of money. And I haven't seen any argument that what you'd have to prove is that it becomes more expensive more rapidly to gain a larger share of the network for a script coin, and I haven't seen any argument that even attempts to demonstrate this.
Yeah,
certainly not convincingly. And so let's go back to the ultimate problem here, the network effect. So even if these claims were true, this would still not be a reason that Litecoin would succeed or even be important at all, and not a reason to invest in it, because Bitcoin has the overwhelmingly larger share of the network, and there's very little business going on in Litecoin by comparison, and hence there's always an opportunity cost to holding Litecoin over holding Bitcoins. And this effect compounds itself because people who move Bitcoin will systematically benefit.
Yes.
So consequently, and this effect is, there's a positive feedback loop here, because as more people leave Litecoin, the network gets smaller.
The costs
so it's even worse.
Exponentially.
Exactly. So Litecoin is sort of the primogenitor, the granddaddy of the altcoin movement, because Namecoin and previous altcoins that I don't even know what they were didn't generate this hype. It's really the fact that in the 2013 April mania, Litecoin went crazy because people said, oh, it's like a Bitcoin penny stock, and oh, I missed the Bitcoin train. I'll just get some. Yes,
it's I
forgot about that one. Yes, so much of this was based on empty slogans as well, right? So so Litecoin went crazy, and the amount that Litecoin increased in price was much greater than what Bitcoin did. And Bitcoin went up something like 27 times in a couple of months. I don't know what Litecoin did, but it was even more ridiculous. So people got the idea that these altcoins could be profitable, even though it doesn't make any logical sense. It's just that a large group of people who didn't understand the reason that Bitcoin has a value proposition, they all went into Litecoin because they thought they had missed it. So, so our friend Napoleon calls the altcoin market a regret market. And it's for people who feel like they missed out on Bitcoin. And they're trying to replay. So a comparison I made,
the cargo cultism.
Yes, so cargo cultism, that's another thing. Like they're sort of going through the motions, but they don't understand what the value proposition is. So they're like building a bamboo airport and they think planes are going to land in it, right? So another comparison that I made is a post-traumatic stress disorder. So they experienced the trauma of not getting into Bitcoin early enough and missing out on, making millions of dollars. And they're making it worse for themselves by replaying the trauma. They're still not getting into Bitcoin. They're just they're trying to redo the same thing.
Right, so if you believe that Bitcoin has left the station, which I would argue it's still at the station,
it's just that
moving forward.
It's just that there's more and more stations.
Now they're just letting the train get farther away from them,
right,
before they realize they should probably just get on.
So like, it's so obvious, right? Like if you can't, it doesn't take any work to create an altcoin. You just make a logo and you change some features, you change some magic numbers in the code, and there you go.
Right, and people cut on to that, and that's why at the beginning of 2013 we had these kind of Litecoin manias. By the end of 13, we had gone through what I call the Scambrian explosion of altcoins.
Yes.
Where we have literally hundreds of altcoins now.
Yeah.
And they were just every day there was a new one. Oh, maybe this one's going to take off. Maybe this one, potcoin is for the drug market, so that's going to go insane. There's titcoin and sexcoin for the adult industry. And
yes.
I think there was a Lebowski coin.
Because
why not?
In normal life, we go around having a different currency for every store. Well, let's go into the right. It's like you buy a coupon for Target, and there you go. But it isn't like that at all, because a coupon it has value because it's guaranteed to be worth a certain amount at the store.
Essentially like a bearer bond.
So, but if you make potcoin, there isn't any guarantee that anybody's going to accept it in exchange for pot.
Yeah.
Right?
There's in the name.
Yeah. There's just nothing.
There's an announcement on Bitcoin Talk.
So money has value because of its liquidity, and a coupon has value because it's backed by the promise of some store or other entity. But potcoin has neither of those.
Right.
And none of the other ones too. So as time went on, these things got more and more elaborate. So it started out where you could literally just make a straight up clone of Bitcoin and change literally nothing other than the name, that actually happened. This is what Jesus coin was, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So the great story about that one is, so they invented Jesus coin, which is exactly like Bitcoin. And so someone created a bot that just relays all Bitcoin blocks into the Jesus coin network. So nobody can make a real block in Jesus coin. You do have to change something, or else somebody will do that. But you make a bunch of straight up clones, but then eventually people started to realize, like, you know, there's nothing new here. So you needed to start adding features. So then we started coming up with things like proto shares,
yeah.
And this started the trend of the generalized smart contract engine, right? Because Bitcoin's script system isn't good enough. So we need to create a whole new currency just so that script, right?
As opposed to taking the current one and building the security features of it so that it can handle more types of stuff.
Well, you don't even have to change Bitcoin, still another layer that uses Bitcoin. And that's sort of what open transactions is going to do eventually. So we got proto shares, and then we had Mastercoin. So
let's get this on.
And then there was Ethereum, and then there was like Swarm, and a bunch of these things. I may be missing one. I kind of think there was another one somewhere in there.
I think we skipping back. I guess. There's also a rise in So Litecoin had this idea that we need to change the hashing algorithm.
Oh yeah.
And later on, not too later on, there was stuff like Primecoin, later Purecoin.
Yeah.
Because they realized Primecoin is probably not.
I don't know why they didn't notice that immediately, but yes.
you had the rise of, coming up with different ways of hashing.
Yeah.
So with Primecoin, it was proof of stake, which would allow you would have a greater chance of finding a block if you had more stake in the system.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. What is the treatise on altcoins guy? Is Andrew, right?
Yeah, Andrew Polstra.
Andrew, yes. So he's writing this paper, the treatise on altcoins, and he's going to explain in detail why a lot of this is bullshit. And of course, he's a professional cryptographer, so he'll look at this from a technical perspective. But he already came out with part of the paper, which is on proof of stake, and he explains why that doesn't work. And it's a great paper, but basically the reason is that if there is a fork in Bitcoin's network, one side is always going to win, because you can't mine on both. So it's sort of like an altcoin is created if there's a fork, and then one of them gains value and the other loses value, and then eventually everybody will just mine the valuable one. And so there is a consensus, even if there is a fork in the network. And of course, you could argue that Bitcoin's consensus still works even against all the other altcoins, because we're arguing that they aren't going to work because of this network effect. But in a proof of stake coin, in both chains, so there isn't an opportunity cost to mining both of them at the same time. And this means that there isn't a consensus happening. You can just keep forking forever, and you're not doing anything that guarantees any kind of consensus will happen.
Which was the entire point of having mining in the first place.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that came out, because I didn't quite understand the problem with proof of stake before then. I was kind of suspicious, but that really shows how silly it is. And of course, the same thing would apply to proof of burn. I don't think that there's any difference as far as that objection goes. A proof of burn means that you, instead of proving that you have stake by owning coins, you have to prove that you destroyed coins, and then you get extra mining power. So then we had Primecoin. That was kind of a fun one.
Right. So Primecoin, its value proposition was that it's the hashes were worth something, as if distributed consensus is not worth anything.
I like how you said value proposition there too, because of course it's not a value proposition at all. have a different mining algorithm. That was how they talked about it.
Right. Yeah. And so the issue here is, okay, so the idea was that when you mine a block, the hash that was found would also serve the purpose of being some large prime number that you could prove existed.
Well, I believe you had to find primes that are in a particular sequence, or had several that had a particular property.
In any case, you were solving a given mathematical problem.
Right.
And so thus, it has value because here's a solution to something we didn't know before. It has value outside. But once again, this doesn't. One, this comes from the idea that proof of work is wasteful, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
And like I just hinted at, distributed consensus is not wasteful. People are paying that much for distributed consensus because that's how much they want distributed consensus. And because it keeps Bitcoin a secure system. But there's also plenty of other problems. One of which being you're invoking politics into the consensus mechanism. Everyone has to agree that a given problem is the problem that ought to be solved, which I would imagine there would be a fork between the breast cancer awareness people and the people wanting to find extraterrestrial life.
Well, that kind of gets into the appcoin idea. So let's move into that next. There's still more on Primecoin.
Right. There's also, I don't believe that there's any security benefits. In fact, I feel like I've heard arguments that it was less secure.
I would agree, because we talked about the handicap principle before and about the value of a contest.
Yeah, so I just, my thoughts came back to me. The reason being is the point of the proof of work is to basically distill sort of the purest opportunity cost that you can signal, because that way these anonymous people on the network have a way to trust one another that they're providing useful information to agree upon. So once again, someone who perhaps might have more interest in just finding a prime number will do any fork of it as long as they can find that prime number, rather than focusing on what gives security to the network.
Right. So it's actually better if the mining algorithm is something that is useless for anything else. It's kind of the wrong way around.
Yeah.
To say, oh, now it'll be useful with the mining. But actually, I think that they were wrong on that, because as far as I know, it's not actually useful to find these sequences of primes.
I guess you could say there was like a proof of concept.
Sure.
Because then immediately we saw people saying we'd go on to better things like cancer research and protein folding and extraterrestrial. Yeah. They were coming up. Suddenly, they got their thinking caps on, and their gears were turning.
Yeah.
The future was seen. An interesting point along with this, and going back to the ASIC problem, Oleg Andreev had that great little article about why he believed proof of work was basically the only way you could go about solving the problem that Bitcoin is trying to solve.
Yeah,
kind of the variation on the Byzantine generals problem.
Right,
and in that, when we then accept that you want to find the best opportunity cost, it actually becomes it's good that ASICs exist.
Yeah. Because
this means ASICs, by definition, are chips that are made specifically for the purposes of the Bitcoin hashing algorithm. Meaning, if they are not Bitcoin mining, that's completely worthless, except for maybe if they want a heat generator. So because of that, it's actually good that ASICs exist. And the more ASICs that exist, the more people are making these capital investments in Bitcoin specifically, and it's so specific that there's nothing else that can be done with it.
Oh, speaking, I just have an aside here. I had a friend tell me the other day that she got a bunch of ASIC machines for free at a mining conference because, you know, they're not, the older ones aren't profitable at all anymore, and she is going to use them to heat her house. So she will get a little bit of Bitcoin out of them, and she'll get to heat her house. So that's nice. That's a weakness in the Bitcoin system, is that you can use the ASIC machines to heat your house.
Yeah, so unfortunately, as much as we want a pure opportunity cost, it'll be very difficult fighting thermodynamics.
If we can have a hashing algorithm that only runs at absolute zero temperature, that would be better. So another thing about Primecoin is that the algorithm is it's memory hard, but it's not memory hard to. That's I want to briefly mention is that so many of these new mining algorithms that were developed, there was like there were a bunch of them that I can't blank on the name. There was like Dagger, and there was another one. Oh, Momentum. That was for like proto shares, right? Like these things were developed by shady startups, and then just like released and said, "Oh, look, here's an investment," right? That is so irresponsible. In cryptography, you're not supposed to just use a new algorithm.
You never roll your own crypto system.
You just, you have to let the cryptographers pick at it for a while before you know, it was a while. People were, you know, people are still using DES today, even though
it's completely broken.
It is not, well, it isn't really broken. I mean, you can use triple DES.
Sure.
But there are known, we know we have plenty of algorithms that have better properties. We almost certainly know that. It's just that DES has such a strong record of success that people trust it. And it's just, you shouldn't make up a new cryptographic algorithm and then just release it as an investment.
Right.
Especially a fraudulent investment.
Yeah, and then if you're worried about the distributed aspect, I first heard this argument from Adam Back, and he was talking about, you know, SHA-256 has been around a long time, so by now it's out there in every form you can imagine, even to the point I believe there's open hardware for it.
Yeah.
Meaning that if you want a distributed algorithm, SHA-256 is the most accessible one, so the barriers to entering the manufacturing market are much lower than any others. With script, you know, there's fewer people in the world that actually understand script enough to be able to implement certain things. But SHA-256 is so well known that those barriers to entry don't exist. Plus, it's been around so long that you know, you have more certainty that there are not weaknesses in it.
So how long have we been going for? Oh, plenty of time left. So good. Lots of things to complain about. So
like appcoins.
Appcoins, yes. So eventually, people started to get the idea that you can't just make just a new currency for no reason. You can't just make like a red coin or moon coin or whatever. Do you know who originally came up with the idea of appcoins?
I believe. Yeah, I believe the term was coined by David Johnston. But,
okay, so David Johnston, our favorite person in the Bitcoin chasm, for that you could create a cryptocurrency and use it to fund. Oh yeah, now I remember, because that's originally what Mastercoin was. The idea is that you send Bitcoins to an Exodus address, and then the people who bought into it would receive a certain number of master coins once the project was completed. And so So he said you could do the same thing with other ideas. So you create MadeSafe, and the people who funded it get a bunch of MadeSafe coins.
Yeah, so it can work as an investment vehicle. It can work as sort of a smart contracts engine, a distributed exchange. Everyone needed to tout the idea they have a distributed exchange.
Yeah. So, but this still doesn't change anything about the value proposition of a currency, because there's still no guarantee that anybody is going to want to hold it. So, as long as people are crazy for altcoins, then you can make money funding, an open source project by creating an altcoin. But once people get the idea that none of these things are valid investments, then you can't anymore, because nobody's going to buy the new currency. And also, like, how crazy is it to have a different currency for every piece of software, right?
Like, it goes back to the same thing. You don't want a different currency for everywhere you go.
Yeah. I mean, so if you use Bash, most of the commands are just separate programs, right? So you have like an LS coin and a CD coin and an MKDIR coin. Why not? And there, you have a Linux kernel coin. In fact, you release a different coin for every version of Linux that comes out. What a great idea, right? So now why don't we talk a little bit about Dogecoin, unless you had more to say on appcoins.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes.
Yeah, well, I think it's necessary to make a distinction, more of a distinction between altcoins and appcoins, and also for the sake of more of general comprehension on the topic, to bring things back to like monetary theory itself and the principles that you talked about at the beginning, the network effect. For instance, the Mastercoin guys would even say that that Bitcoin is the primal layer of liquidity in the crypto space. So they themselves would acknowledge that Bitcoin is the coin of major liquidity, right? So I think for a lot of people, it would be a lot more helpful if you guys keep bringing things back to those solid, monetary principles that we are universally identifiable, and that can allude to whatever, everything you guys are making distinctions of. Okay,
well, sure. Well, I mean, the basic problem is just if you create MadeSafe coin, some people have to want to hold the coin in order for it to have value. And if it doesn't have value, it's useless. You can't use it to make payments because you're sending people something worthless, right? So there have to be people who want to hold the coin. Nobody wants to hold it. It just doesn't have any value. And they have to want to hold it more than they want to hold Bitcoin. Because if they didn't, they would just hold Bitcoin.
Until they wanted to use that specific coin for that specific purpose.
Exactly. So there's this incentive for everybody to try to hold the MadeSafe coin for as little time as possible.
Hold Bitcoin for as much time as possible.
Right, because there's the opportunity cost. Bitcoin is more liquid. But if everybody has this incentive, that means that the value of the coin has to go down, which makes it even less liquid and even less useful. And this is a positive feedback effect. There's nothing to stop it. And even if you say, like, one block comes out every 10 minutes, so you have to hold it for 10 minutes. Well, not necessarily. You can have a third-party service that manages exchanges and does thousands per second, and then effectively you can hold the coin for fractions of a second, shorter amount of time as it takes to send a message across the internet.
And the less people want it, maybe time would find ways to make that tiny bit smaller.
Yeah. So the nice thing about Dogecoin is that the people in it really believed in it, and all of the most the funniest conversations that I had were with Dogecoiners, because they didn't feel like they were trying to scam me. They just didn't know what was going on. So like I remember once so first of all, Dogecoin was clearly a joke when it came out.
Right. And
people started taking it seriously, and the whole point of Dogecoin is that you're not supposed to take it seriously. So it had a mania, and then it fell. I haven't heard much about it recently, but I don't think it's doing too well. But I remember this one conversation where I was talking to somebody about the network effect, and he said, well, maybe these currencies can be used for different things. Like you wouldn't take out a loan in Bitcoin, or you wouldn't give out a loan in Bitcoin, would you? And I was like, no. He says, well, maybe Dogecoin would be a good currency for that because it's inflationary. And it's like, I mean, how can you think about that for 5 seconds? There's a problem because you have Dogecoin, and you still don't want to make out a loan in it because you have Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin is making out a loan, that still affects what everybody else is doing, even if they don't have any Bitcoin, because you still have to make sure the loan is better than holding Bitcoins. So if Bitcoin exists, there's really nobody should give out loans, basically, as long as Bitcoin is growing. But apparently that is the kind of level of argument that they have. And of course, they also like to buy really strange things.
Like NASCARs.
Yes, that was amusing.
And Jamaican bobsleds.
Yeah, oh yeah, they funded the Jamaican bobsled team to the Olympics.
Yes, which of course I'm opposed to because you should be hoarding, but that's what happens when you have an inflationary coin where people want to just tip.
Yes, so that was sort of the funny thing is, how did they think that their Dogecoin was going to be a good investment?
It was pure marketing. Yeah, how they believe. They believe that a money gets its value by marketing rather than just sort of these fundamentals about network effects and reciprocal altruism.
Right, yeah. And that was in the same conversation that I mentioned before. This was what this person said to me. He said, like, you Bitcoiners aren't pulling your weight around here. You're not doing any marketing. And I was just like, oh, just please, no more marketing. Stop with the marketing. The best way to market Bitcoin is to act like you don't care whether other people want it, because that shows that you're so assured that they're going to want it eventually. You don't have to bother.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, sometimes when people tell me that they're unsure about the Bitcoins they have and they're thinking of selling it because for whatever reason it's not at the price they were hoping, I just offer to buy it.
Yeah.
It's like, fine, give it to me.
Yeah. Right. So why don't we talk about Ethereum and then close the discussion there? How does that sound?
Sure. So first thing I'd say about Ethereum is they had a gorgeous website, and I found this interesting because over the lifetime of all these altcoins, basically it's been a story of learning how to do web development or web design. At first, there's like really awful pages, Quark coin and all those scams. It was just like the same basic page, whatever. At some point, they learned Bootstrap, so it's a slightly nicer site. And of course, people have this sort of natural tendency of like, if it's a nice site, it's more reputable.
Yeah.
It's more trustworthy. And over time, Ethereum just like knocked it out of the park. Great looking website.
Oh, well, great. Well, actually, let me quick interject because you mentioned Quark coin. That reminded me of something. During this period, when all of the altcoins were going crazy, and there was like a new one every day, right? or more than one. Like there was almost sort of a tacit acknowledgement that it was all bullshit. And because I remember like Quarkcoin comes out, and a lot of people said, well, this is an obvious scam. It's like 90% pre-mined, and the fact that it has 9 hashing algorithms doesn't matter. It doesn't make any sense. But people were like, but Max Kaiser is involved, and he's a great pump and dumper. So we better get in on the bottom on this thing, right? Like, it's so weird.
Yeah.
And then he made his own. He made Maxcoin.
I mean, that being said, if you do know that a pump and dump scheme is going to work, there is like an incentive to want to jump in. But you shouldn't avoid the fact, you shouldn't try to lie to yourself about what it is.
When it's an open secret that it's a pump and dump scheme, that's the time when you should get out.
Right, yeah.
Because you have to have somebody, look, if you're in a room and you don't know.
It needs to be a kind of conspircy.
Right. If you're in a room and you don't know who the sucker is.
You're the sucker.
Exactly.
Right, so we can think of, you know, you were saying earlier, you know, you turn these things on because you just want free money. And these guys realize that. So it's really like the drug addicts want to be able to turn their machine on, get their next fix.
Yeah.
And people like Max Kaiser or whoever's making these forks, I'm to these people's faces before, which
fantastic.
is a great way to make friends.
So Ethereum has this smart contract engine, and
complete.
Yes, that was the buzzword for a while. Then everybody sort of forgot about that because that stopped working.
What was the buzzword?
Turing complete. Yeah. So now it's like you can do. Well, first of all, like when do you actually need a Turing complete contract?
Right. And when do you need a Turing complete contract of which the content should be available to everyone?
Right. Because I'm pretty sure that nobody has, in the history of the universe, I don't think that very many people have made a contract that require, arbitrary loops to evaluate. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that there's no actual use for that other than like pulling a prank on your relatives in your will or something.
Yeah, certainly the worst marriage contract I can imagine.
If P equals NP, then my money goes to this heir, and if not, then it goes to the other heir or something, right? So that's a bunch of BS. But the other weird thing about Ethereum is that it is so ridiculously elaborate that it is crazy to me that anybody believed it was going to be complete ever. Like, not even the schedule they gave. They were supposed to, weren't they supposed to be finished with it a long time ago, in fact? Yeah.
Pushing it back.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that if you just read their blog, the post by blanking on his name, Vitalik Buterin, they're fascinating.
He's a very smart guy.
Yeah, but
brilliant.
The issues that he gets into are insane. Like, you just shouldn't make something that gets you into these problems in the first place. Like, it's just crazy.
It's sort of a playground for crypto wet dreams.
Yes. So I remember I was talking to Conrad Graf once, and I was like, things are all scams, blah, blah, blah. And he goes like this, what about Ethereum? Because there was just such a huge amount of hype when
Ethereum can do anything.
Yeah.
You ever see that old website, zombo.com?
I remember that.
You can do anything at Zombo.
Let Zombo.com take you to the limits of your imagination.
Ethereum is the cryptocurrency version of Zombo.com.
Yeah. So anyway, do you have any other topics you think are important?
No. I mean, I do think Ethereum has one thing going for it. Sure. It's the oil to Bitcoin's gold.
Oh, it has a great slogan. Yes.
But you know, I think was it Jimmy Song had the great article about it's called "Complexity is the Enemy of Security."
Oh yeah.
This goes back to what you were saying about Ethereum. It's a super complex project, and Vitalik and all his, you know, he's so smart. He's thinking of you know, amazing things, and he's trying to come up with, you know, how, you know, Satoshi just picked this one way of distributing the coins.
Yeah.
But what is the best way to be doing it?
Yeah.
So we're mulling over that. You know, Satoshi picked a great hashing algorithm. It worked.
Yeah.
But what's the best one? And so there's been months being spent on trying to find the very best one.
Yeah.
And once, even, which they haven't done yet, as far as I know. And since the beginning, price signals seem to mean nothing to them. But even when you pick all that, you have to be able to build it, and you have to be able to build it securely. Now, Bitcoin has gotten to where it is today, and it's still ultimately, you know, not the most secure thing in the world. Like, it'll take a much higher hashing rate, you know, before we can be totally sure that the government can't buy, you know, $1 billion of ASICs and kind of mess with things. But it has gotten to where it is because over time there have been people building it. It didn't start off at day one perfect. In fact, there was some amazing bugs in the early days. So complexity is something that, you know, you have to appreciate the time that it takes, or sorry, security, the time it takes to reach it. And Bitcoin, you know, on these kind of, on the basis of what I was saying, Bitcoin is sort of like a simple cryptocurrency compared to what Ethereum is trying to be. So if you take all of what it took to like figure out Bitcoin and how to get Bitcoin to work, and then you want to make it exponentially more difficult, and then try to make it secure, you know, of course we're not going to expect Ethereum to exist as a secure, usable product for a very, very long time. And in that case, you should just be holding on to Bitcoin and just doing that instead of buying into their pre-sale for a product that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Or if you do want to buy from Mircea Popescu,
right,
with a half off. Or
so, well, you know, Justice Ronvier compared Ethereum to a worldwide computer that's 1 million times slower than a normal one, and all of its computation is public. You know, great. What do I want to do with it? So anyway, well, yeah, sorry for babbling so long about altcoins, but why don't we can move out to discussions now. And because we're using the laptop for the microphone, speak or come around over here if you have one.
The argument based on measurement, and in terms of having different systems of measurement, I found it to be a very good argument, because it shows the lack of necessity of having more systems of measurement or different currencies in the world. Maybe you guys can elaborate more on that.
Right. So, I mean, and to be clear, like when you want to say money is a measurement of things, that gets into some
well, it's
tricky epistemology. But yeah, you know, that is like a good way to think about network effects. Like we were saying, you know, you obviously don't want to have to, like, imagine you had to speak a different language to talk to each of your friends. That'd be absurd. What if everyone could just talk in one language? You know, everyone will over time probably do that. Likewise, you know, why would you want to spend money, a different currency at every store you go to, or even every city you go to? Wouldn't it be nicer if you just had one? That way more people can engage in sort of the same language of money, and be able to, that network effect grows, and the larger the network effect, the network is, the more valuable it is, because there's more trade that can occur with it. So yeah, it leads right back to what we had talked about with that.
Well, I once got into an argument with somebody about this topic, you know, and he was saying, like, in the future, children will all create their own currencies. And I was like, yeah, just like how they create their own systems of measurement and their own languages.
Latin and,
yeah, they do sometimes do that,
and then
but
they
it's not
grow
like,
out of it and join the rest of us.
So would you say, is there a distinction between coins and altcoins? It's almost like as if it were an intentional claim to be an app coin based on marketing, but it's really an altcoin.
I don't think there's really a distinction. I mean,
I think it's a shift in marketing. It's like, oh, we realize that we can't argue that we're making a completely different currency. Why don't we say, you know, there's a lot of tropes that exist in Bitcoin, and one of them is cryptocurrencies are great, Bitcoin is great, currency is just the first app. So everyone's looking for the killer app, as if currency wasn't it all along. So there's been a shift towards that sort of style of speaking, where now we're making the next apps for cryptocurrencies.
Well, I want to close with just one other thing. So there is this argument that altcoins are experimental platforms, which is good. Like, doing experiments is great. The problem is when you claim that they're investments, because they're not. And it's also not necessarily the most efficient way of doing experiments to, you know, create a whole cryptocurrency around it, when you could just use the Bitcoin testnet. You could create your own testnet. You don't need to make a logo and market it. You just need to make a proof of concept. So there have been some useful ideas that have been put into altcoins, but they're still not investments. Like, we have things like Darkcoin, or is that the right one? Because I know that one of these was
there's Darkcoin, and that tries to implement, you know, ring signatures, and it has coin join baked right into the system.
Yeah,
and that's interesting.
And that's you know, that's kind of a good thing to be doing, because that can create demand to put it in Bitcoin, but that still doesn't mean that it's going to be a good investment.
Right. In fact, if you find that it's working there, you should be trying to get into the better currency.
Anything else?
Well, what about what guys counterparties?
Okay.
Are you guys out of time, or?
I have about 2 more minutes.
Well, counterparty, that isn't isn't that just a re-implementation of Mastercoin? It's basically open source Mastercoin. I mean,
right. Well, Mastercoin is also open source.
Oh, yeah, right.
Mastercoin had not actually released much of a product. I don't even know what it's at now. But Counterparty was like, oh, well, here's the code for it.
Oh yeah. So, well, I mean, the idea there, that just shows that anything you do in one of these altcoins, somebody else can re-implement. Yeah. So it's not like
we obviously saw how easily it is to just fork Bitcoin.
Yeah, and they also put Ethereum into Counterparty recently, didn't they? That was kind of funny.
Yeah, they added the smart contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, if you know, and then it's also kind of using Bitcoin as sort of a backing. So even though it falls trapped to the same kind of liquidity problem, it's still funny to go back towards, like, how can we just use Bitcoin as a currency?
So, John, you had a question?
Yeah, so...
Oh, shit, you wanted to be pseudonymous.
John Smith. John Smith.
Yeah, right,
yeah,
that's his name.
So I guess one of the arguments SMMC is, well, the government, if this blockchain technology is so great, they're going to come out with their own blockchain fedcoin.
Yeah.
But it's going to be centralized. And so I think that the centralized aspect is pretty easy to deal with, because if it's centralized, it defeats the entire purpose.
Right. Yes.
So what about the argument that they're going to come out with their own decentralized blockchain? They're going to pre-mine the hell out of it, and then they're going to legitimize it, sort of bootstrap the network effect, but then sort of keep the initial spoils for themselves, sort of capture this lot of value, and that might be able to compete, sort of to overcome the first mover advantage of Bitcoin.
Well, I kind mean, you know, that's not something I can prove either way. I could say that I kind of doubt it, but you know, the dollar is already a cryptocurrency. I mean, it's virtually all digital. There's very little cash around anymore in comparison to the total. So it's basically a digital currency, and Bitcoin is still beating it. And now, of course, you know, I would argue that the reason Bitcoin is winning is the fact that it gives people freedom, and there are profit opportunities in the Bitcoin network which are not available in the dollar because the dollar is tightly controlled, and you can go through Bitcoin and skip all the middlemen that are required.
You know what I would also say. The government agents, Daniel has written an article called Bitcoin's Subtlety and Allure, which basically argues that Bitcoin gives government agents the incentive to defect and just go to Bitcoin. So in fact, there's tons of profit opportunities. So risking their political careers on this big investment of trying to do that in hopes that it can beat out Bitcoin seems much riskier than just winning off Bitcoin in the first place. Plus, these are the guys that run the post office. These are the guys that try to make healthcare.gov. So them trying to make a crypto, I'd like to watch.
Well, you know, I have this other article, Bitcoin's Rugged Individualism, that goes into that same point. But
the agency problem.
Just imagine the government trying to implement their own, just use Bitcoin at all. Like, you need kind of a different structure to be able to use Bitcoin effectively.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to see them try to build such a thing. Like, what if Bitcoin starts taking over? Like, they're going to be way behind.
Even if they pre-mine, you have the political problem of, well, CIA, how much to the FBI, how much to the Department of Justice, how much to the White House, how much, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, there's these same issues.
And just look, I mean, look at how long it's taking for this bit license thing to go through. Like, is that even there anymore?
Yeah, it's still in the works, of course.
But it's like by the time they actually are able to create some kind of regulation, Bitcoin has already evolved way beyond what they understood when they first started writing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Government agents, just like everyone else, their best opportunity is just to go into Bitcoin. So one coin to rule them all.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. This was a fun discussion, I thought. So I'll see you next time when I guess we'll be talking about Bitcoin scams, since we didn't come up with anything else. But that's a great topic.
Yeah.